slept here for days. I felt your heartbeat, felt your mouth breathe, but it's not real. We were close to see the sun, but clouds got in our way, and
Hello, good evening and welcome everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Welcome to this special panel debate hosted by myself. Got some great guests today. Got a bit of an issue in the studio with one of them, but hopefully she will be joining as soon as possible. Just want to thank, as always, my patrons who have supported my channel. So Hive Group, Tarsus Group, 19 Events, Smart Digital, Easy Fares and Rarusny. You've probably seen many posts also for my event relief challenge fundraiser that's going to be happening next Wednesday. 24 hours of programming. I'm going to stay awake for. We've got some fantastic companies. Please do join the event page and it'll be streamed directly into that. And there's going to be more posts about that very soon. And generally, obviously, you can see all my content if you follow me on LinkedIn or search Dan Assor on YouTube or Facebook. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my panelists who are going to talk about the state of the exhibitions and events industry. And I should say, obviously, if you've got comments or questions for the panel, please do put them in the LinkedIn group or in the chat. They will appear. And I'll do my very best to get to as many as possible. So I'm just going to introduce the first panelist of today, Lisa Hannant. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Dan. Good to be here.
How are you?
Thanks for inviting. Very well, thank you.
Good. So Lisa is the Group MD of Clarion Events. So we welcome Lisa. The next special panelist this evening is Ashley Roberts, or Ash Roberts, because we've just decided that only certain people call you Ashley. So Ash is the General Manager of Omanexpo, and you're going to talk a bit about what's happening in your region in a few minutes. The third panelist is Jackie Boughton from Barbican, who's having a few Wi-Fi issues, so hopefully we'll get Jackie on as humanly possible as soon as we can. So we're going to start off, guys. A few people have said greetings, so thank you very much. We're going to start off. Obviously, we had the announcement from our good friend, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, on Monday, and he was talking about the easing of the lockdown restrictions. So many people I've heard from and commented over LinkedIn, Twitter, social media, fantastic, positive. But Lisa, I'm going to go to you first. What's your view of the announcement? And over the last 48 hours, what has that meant to Clarion? And obviously, I know you run events internationally in 13 different locations. But I guess the announcement will have an impact on your business as a whole. So it'd be good to get your view to start off with.
Sure. Well, clearly it was a much needed announcement because certainly the UK market had been operating with very little direction, but also very little indication of when that may change. So it was a very much needed message, which clearly has been very well received by most of the industry. But clearly, all is not set in stone. So we do have some gateways that we need to move through, and there is every indication that we can begin to move through them, I hope, with some level of pace. But there is some caveats in there, without being negative. There's certainly some caveats in there which could cause us to put the brakes on at any one of those 4 to 5 week periods. So it's been fantastic news, and it really does give, I think, those individuals that work in the industry a much needed boost, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Sure. But there is still much work to be done. But I think outside of that, it just helps begin to build back confidence into the UK market as a whole. We've seen some really good progress in terms of the vaccination rollout, which I think has been, one of those key indicators that's led, I think, to some confidence from the government that there can be an opening up of the wider society, which then, of course, has a knock-on impact to the economy. And then can also then mean that we can begin to have a version of operating which is as close to normal as I think we could have predicted, certainly in the first half of this year.
Sure. Thank you for that. I'm going to come back and pick up on some of your points. But obviously, Ash, as an expat sitting in the region that you are in Oman, it'd be great to get your view because obviously I know you're still very closely connected with the UK community.
Yeah, I mean, I think the news is fantastic. It really is. I mean, for a number of reasons. I mean, first, the UK is one of the territories that's very much a bedrock for the exhibition industry, not only because a lot of the global organisers are British companies, but you've got big global events that are run out of the UK. I think the other part is a lot of the other countries around the world look to the UK for inspiration. I mean, UK in particular has been one of the worst hit countries in the world. And the fact that they might actually be coming out of this quicker than perhaps individuals expected, myself included, I think it's very, very positive. I think, as Lisa was rightly saying, it's a very, very fluid situation. So although there's earmarks the 21st of June, who knows what happens between now and then. And during a call yesterday with Chris Skeeth of the AEO, he rightly said actually during the announcement earlier this week, the number of times that events was mentioned prior to then, events really didn't come up. And I think that's an encouraging sign that there is very much intent to bring our industry back. But I think for organisers, for events businesses in the UK, everything we do it hinges on a date. So have sight of that, at least you can start to begin to plan, bring staff back, hopefully recruit people. I think it's exceptionally encouraging, but it's a start, and we certainly know we're not out of this just yet.
Sure. I think you make a good point, actually, and power to the elbow of Chris and his team and all the other industry associations and lobbyists. They obviously came from being quite behind, I guess, sort of travel, tourism, hospitality industry, who obviously had, thrown a lot of money at lobbying government for many years. But actually, the progress that we've made over the last 12 months has been significant. And I think you're absolutely right. It resonated with me when events was actually mentioned because, March, April, it wasn't mentioned at all, was it, last year? It was all thrown in with hospitality. So really, really exciting. And that can only sort of serve us in good stead for the future as well, in terms of lobbying of government. Lisa, in terms of the events that Clarion do, so I'm just stalling because Jackie hopefully is just about to join us. Hi Jackie, we are live.
Well, hello everyone, and this is why we want live events to return as soon as possible.
I was going to say, for those viewers that are old enough that watch Big Brother, you remember Davina said, "You are live on Channel 4, please do not swear." That's what I was going to, that suddenly popped into my head. Jackie, I'm going to come back to you in 2 seconds. We're just talking about the announcement from Monday. Hopefully you can hear me. So Lisa, so obviously you had rolled your events, I guess, into Q3, Q4. So am I right in saying, in terms of the announcement, clearly you're not going to bring them forward, but that gives you more confidence in terms of the planning operation? Yep.
Yeah, I think that, whilst we have, I think the way we've always tried to begin to think about the return back to live has always been national first, followed by international, because it's much easier to see a situation where we would be able to run a national show. Not so easy for internationals over the late summer coming into autumn. That's when it would be more difficult to be running those shows over the summer period. So from that perspective, no matter when a show was taking place, the minute there was a version of Go Live, it really does, we've seen it even in the last couple of days, it does provide new dialogue with customers and, a view from customers, doesn't matter what industry, that actually there is a route to market coming back to life for them. Sure. And so, it's been a good step, and actually makes it much easier to perceive that shows in September, October, November, are a real possibility this time.
Yeah, and it's also great. And I'm going to come to you now, Jackie, just in case you disappear into the Ethernet. I was just obviously asking the guys about the reaction. Now you're in a different position, and it's really exciting for me to have you as a guest because a lot of my guests have been trade show organisers, which is fantastic. But obviously, can you bring to life your role and also the types of events that you look after, and then how the announcement on Monday has maybe impacted your planning, which I know is only 48 hours, but it'd be interesting for the viewers to understand that. And she's frozen. Okay, so I'm going to come back to you, Ash. It'd be useful, obviously, you're in Oman. Can you just give us a view as to their view on Europe and the UK and the situation and how actually it is where you are as well? Because, you know, international travel is very important. Lisa, I guess even the UK, you're still, some of the events have international travel. So it'd be good, Ash, to get your view from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're based in Oman. We operate across a number of countries in the Middle East, particularly the GCC. And in terms of, you know, the first question that you asked, and what is the view looking at the UK? Oman in particular, there's a long running history with the British, with UK. So they look to the UK inspiration of how they're dealing with the pandemic. And I think certainly it is encouraging that they're seeing countries beginning to open it. We've got across the border of UAE, one of the territories where we operate. You've got two very big events that took place this week. So in Abu Dhabi, you had IDEX, and in Dubai, you had Gulf Food. And these aren't just big events, they are big international events, because a go date is one part of it, you know, having the permission to run an event, but probably the biggest obstacle we're going to face, and I'm sure Lisa would have a view on this with the international events that sits in her remit, is getting people to come back to the region. Not just the willingness, actually the plausibility. Our country is going to be allowed them. I mean, in a lot of the countries that we're operating in, there is institutional quarantine, similar to that's been recently introduced to the UK. So, you know, once we get the go date, we're obviously then hoping at the same time, or we have sight of what is the situation going to be. You look at Abu Dhabi, and what they did with IDEX is they actually allowed people that were traveling for IDEX, they allowed them free movement of travel, so they didn't need to quarantine. So, you know, both in the Abu Dhabi and the Dubai government have really shown the importance of trade shows, that they can play an integral part of restarting the economy, which I think is fantastic to see. But you know, there is some way to go here. But I believe, you know, a bit of an overused term at the moment, we are starting to see some green shoots, genuine green shoots.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as well, Lisa, in terms of the different countries and what you have to do to enter an event, and what hoops you have to jump through to actually put it on. So, are you going to have to do lateral flow tests? I know that's going to come out in the pilot events, I think, and some of the work that we're going to do as an industry with DCMS. Darcy and Newell here has just asked a question: where do we think the pilots events will be held in April? I don't know if anyone's got any insight into that, but generally, I guess you have to plan for many different outcomes or eventualities in terms of getting people in.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, you know, over the last 12 months, I think as an industry, we've become pretty experts. We've become experts at contingency planning. I think that's all anybody's been doing for the last 12 months. But and there is plan A's, plan B's, you know, you name it, that I think we've all had to have on a continuous basis. And you know, the way we're trying to approach things is, you know, what happens if a show has access from a certain amount of countries? What does the show look like? How can that be developed? And then widening the net as you go forward. And you know, we've tried to build it out so that we've got almost a minimum viable product approach to any show that we're putting on. But there's only so much you can control when it comes down to quarantining. I mean, I do personally believe that the vaccination rollout will play a key part in opening up borders as the months progress. You know, I think that is what's given the UK government some level of confidence to make some of these bold announcements, and it seems to be progressing, you know, fairly well. We've seen some good progress in other countries outside of the UK. You know, US in particular seems to be making some good progress, and I think the more that that's seen globally, then I think the willingness not only of customers to travel, but the willingness of governments to begin to relax borders for those that either have had vaccinations or in some instances have got, there is talk about, particularly international travel with IATA having some form of vaccination passport as well, which will allow access into countries. And I think it's going to be layers of initiatives such as that will begin to free up how we operate. And if you just take the UK government announcement, which is saying, none of the current restrictions would be in place by the 21st of June, should the data indicate that that's possible, then I think that one of the restrictions one would expect to be dropped would be things like quarantining coming into the UK, which to me is when it really does begin to push on.
Thank you. It's interesting because I did a few polls ahead of this chat over the last 48 hours on various social media about whether people will be comfortable having and holding a vaccine passport and having to show it to get into places. LinkedIn, almost 100% yes. Twitter, almost 100% no. I don't know what that says about the different platforms, or maybe my echo chamber on each platform. But Ash, just interesting, will you be happy to hold a vaccine passport if it meant you can go various places?
100%. I mean, as a Brit living overseas with my family back in the UK, I'll do what it takes to go back and see them. And I think, I don't want to get into the politics and necessary views of this, because I think that's a bit of a black hole that I don't necessarily want to go down. I'll follow the rules. The only way we're going to get out of this is to do it together and follow the scientific advice, moving in the same direction, which is where we all want to go, politicians or Joe Blogs. We all want to go in that direction.
Thank you. Jackie is back. We will try again. It's like going to Tim Peake.
I am on a telephone.
Okay.
I'm on a telephone, so excuse me.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's like going to Tim Peake in the space station. We're going to move on to. We're getting a good view of your house as well, which is nice. It's comedy hour. We're going to move on to customer engagement, if I can hold it together. And we had a chat before, last week when we were talking about the panel about how you're engaging with your customers. It'd be interesting to see or hear if even in the last 48 hours, your teams have spoken to them on what they think. I'm going to start with you, Lisa, just if you can give us a sense, and not just from the UK in reference to Boris, but generally international, what Clarion have been doing to keep engagement with customers during this time.
Well, I mean, there's clearly a difference in customer end markets that have different sets of customers, and clearly we also have both B2B shows, but also B2C shows. If I sort of talk about B2C first of all, which has a very different dynamic. That is very much our B2C portfolio is very enthusiast driven. So it's about anything that somebody's passionate about, whether that be cars or Comic Cons and anime. They are very niche targeted things, which the minute individuals are able to attend a show and they feel safe to do so, the appetite for those shows from customers is extremely high. And so I generally think that on the B2C market there'll be a quick bounce back in terms of how people want to experience the live environment. So that's one side. Then we look at B2B, and I think a really good indicator has been the exhibition market in China. If you take a view on, there was a period of time when shows couldn't run in China, as there has been everywhere else in the world. But look at how they have come back very quickly once it's deemed safe to attend. And the majority of shows that have been hosted in China since back end of last year and rolling into this year, the numbers have been pretty similar to how they were historically. Yes, marginally smaller, but the levels of engagement have been so strong. I think, to me, that's one of the best indicators that we can have as an industry, that live is still, exhibitions exist for a reason, and that's because people do want to come together. So that to me is
you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to be doing this. I was like, you don't want to be doing this going forward.
No, no, we don't. And we've all been doing, I'm sure, very similar things in actually spending time to speak to customers in a very different way perhaps than we used to, because before it was all it was engaging them for the next show, moving on to the next show, and so forth, whereas now we actually have had some time to actually take a step back. Clearly none of us would have liked it to have A, lasted this long, and B, been driven by something which is the pandemic, but it has actually made us have those conversations in the right way and actually think about what we're going to do with that information that we're gaining.
Sure. And thank you. And Ash, same question to you and your customers. Actually, if you could do us just a quick intro to the shows that you run and when you're planning on running them, that would be good as well, just for people that aren't aware that are watching.
Yeah, no problem. We've got 5 events planned this year. So from construction, oil and gas, foods, hospitality, and health. Now we've got our first event planned for June. Was planned for March. We're already looking at that one, thinking, does that need to be pushed back? The rest are all towards very end of Q3 and then Q4 onwards.
Sure.
In terms of what we've been doing with our customers, pretty much right from the beginning, we have been very close to our customers. And for the simple reasons, we've never been through this before. And I guess, we felt safety in numbers, stay close to our clients, listen to them. And something we're doing now, actually, that we've really embraced and used a whole lot, and I hope we'll use it once we come out of this, is wherever we're not possible or able to meet in person, opposed to picking up the phone, we want to get on a video call, and we're getting so much more out of people from that, building up much more solid relationships that I think will foster very good, external business relationships as we come out of this. But we've been listening to them a lot. So, when we first were affected by COVID, a lot of our events, we have large Chinese participation at our events in the Middle East. So I guess we felt this quite early on, given that China, that's where it first sort of kicked off. So probably as early as January 2019, we started to feel that something was coming through our Chinese agents. Sure. And at that point, very quickly, we started to consult with our clients, asking them what they wanted to do. Everyone was, very uneasy, a bit nervous. This was new to all of us. And we've stayed very close to them. Again, as I said earlier, it's very fluid. It's a dynamic situation we're in. When we've gone through the whole scenario of, do we virtualize an event? Why do we want to do that? We've gone through that process with our clients, and we've come out quite coherent in the collective decisions. So having things like advisory panels, steering committees, etc., we've had those. They've really come into their own through this situation. So we work with them, but I'll be perfectly honest, there's been some customers that we've had to really work very hard to find solutions that work for both parties. But we're starting to get to that point where we've got a handful of clients that there are ongoing discussions with, but I'd say out of probably a good sort of 12 to 1,500 customers that we deal with, there are probably 5 to 10 that we're having those sort of conversations with. I think that's very, reflective of the support of our clients and the hard work of our commercial team.
Sure, thank you. And Lisa, just I guess it's a general question, but I'm interested to know your opinion on when we can do events again. In your view, do you think the spend levels are going to be similar from clients in terms of their investment into them?
So I actually answer that slightly differently. I think if we put spend to one side, what I do think that customers are going to want is they're going to want to have a more demonstrable way of showing the value that we're delivering. So I don't necessarily see that it will have an impact on spend, but I do think it means that as organisers, as an industry, we're going to have to work very hard at that piece. And that doesn't mean to say that, I'm not talking about square meters. It doesn't mean that we have to therefore give them more square meters. I actually think it's the reverse. What other ways, what other things, what other touch points can we provide for the exhibitor set to meet more of their customers? And what are the different ways that we could connect those exhibitor sets with those visitor sets, which are either through the live event only model or in alternative ways? So I think it's going to be about just making sure that there is clear value, that we can really start to hang off of our propositions. And if we can do that, then I think that we absolutely will be able to continue to engage with the exhibitor spend that they currently have budgets for.
Sure, I think you make a good point. Ultimately, people come to the shows for the content as well. And I've got a message here, a question or statement, should I say, from John Fuel, which actually, Ash, maybe you can have a look at, just in terms of the potential change of the agendas and content, and what we have to do to make sure that it's resonating with people who are going to be turning up. I don't know, with regards to your shows, whether this period you then have to sort of take more of a deeper look into what you're offering.
Yeah, very much so. I think any good organizer has been working hard at this one. And, everyone was, well, say everyone, we'll speak for ourselves. We looked very quickly at the whole virtual concept and virtual concept of, virtual exhibitions. It's been around for a very long time. When I was at VNU Media, Incisive Media, back in 2001, we were doing virtual exhibitions. That's, many moons ago. And actually, they haven't really moved far from that. We've progressed it to where we see what we define as hybrid as a year-round platform that is serving an audience that supports an event. During the event, there's on-demand content, there's live stream content, but throughout the year, looking at aggregated content from particular sources pulled into the site. But it's about understanding what the visitors want, what our ultimate end customer wants, understanding what they want, when they want it, when do they want to receive it, and how do they want to receive it. And we spend quite a bit of time understanding that, and that varies quite a lot depending on the vertical markets you operate in. And then to cut it further, depending on their job function, their job titles, it goes a bit further. So it's quite a complex process that we've gone through and we are going through. So what we are doing is we are setting up platforms to support our events, where we have take our energy events as an example, a number of events. We are in the process of creating a platform that will support those events. Those events feed into it. Come event time, that platform feeds back out to the events itself. And I think there's some organizers that are already doing this and have been doing it for some time. But I think it's something that's been glaring there, looking at us in the face. And I guess we've all been forced to look at this. And I think this is a positive that will come out as COVID, that events will be much stronger, will have different revenue streams, but I think it's more about the audience engagement on a year-round basis. That's probably the most powerful thing that will come from this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Lisa, you'll concur. And when I mentioned customer engagement before, clearly customers include not only the exhibitors but the delegates, even if it's free to attend, right? Because without them, there is no show. So I guess also you've been doing a lot of work with delegate experience and making sure that they understand, what they want from the show going forward, and if they still want, obviously, to engage virtually. Just one post here, and Lisa, this is for you. Jessica has asked, and successes can be defined in many ways, right? Can we talk about, I'm just jumping the agenda a little bit, but just in terms of hybrid models going forward, how do you think that's going to look? And I guess obviously it's different markets and different locations, but
yeah. Well, there's some common themes. I think we certainly made a lot of mistakes in the last 12 months, and I'm sure that we are not alone there in that first period when it was evident that live was not going to happen. There was a lot of attempts to deliver virtual events. Now, it's interesting. Virtual events to me almost means temporary, and so interestingly, the way in which that we sort of approached it was almost as a replacement to live. And I think that we've come a long way since those early months of 2020, and now we view it very differently. So, you know, I don't see us going straight back to just face-to-face only. However, there are some end markets where you know, the show itself is very transactional, and actually what people do want to do is come to the show, either touch the product, place an order, and it is a very different purpose for the show to have. Now, that's not to say that there is not a build up to the show, pre-show, which can be done digitally, and quite often I think we will be doing that, so that the buyer experience when they're on site is very targeted, is very much more in line with you know, meeting their needs in that respect. When it comes to other end industries, then I do think there will be a blend, and yes, we will be, I'm sure, applying in a majority of our shows some element of digital, but I see it much more as an enabler to make the live event experience to be even more valuable whilst people are on site, rather than being something which we have to deliver 365, because I actually think that that's a really challenging task to deliver out on. The expectation is really broad. The ways in which every customer wants to consume digital is very, very different. And, you know, I think by you know, typically a trade show is quite, certain shows of scale are quite broad. They serve many different purposes to many different sets of customers, but under one roof. When you try to build that out digitally, it's very, very difficult, because to try and replicate that online means that you can end up with something actually which doesn't serve any purpose to any set of customers if you're not careful. So very targeted, very niche customer groups, which are delivered digitally throughout the year, I think is absolutely spot on. But broad church approaches, I actually don't think are going to have the traction that live once had. So I do think it's going to need a blend. And the work that Ash was just describing, you know, certainly resonates with me, because it almost goes back to basics. So each individual customer segment and each individual profile needs to be matched, and you can develop products or routes to market for each of those sets should there be critical mass.
Sure. It's interesting, isn't it? This period, not that we wanted it, has given us the opportunity to relook at why we do certain events, or possibly why an event is not performing as well as it should do. You know, when you're on that hamster wheel and you do the event and you've got to go back into it, you don't always have that time. So I guess one positive, if you want to call it that has allowed us to do that. Ash, just briefly, Jade's put up a question for you, which follows on from what Lisa just said, but I'm assuming that's the case. You will encourage, obviously, discussion, you know, feedback all year round.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a benefit for all involved. You know, for the audiences. You know, as long as it's rich content, it's sticky, it keeps attracting people back. It's fresh and it's relevant. And for the exhibitors and sponsors, you know, you've got an opportunity to provide them additional value. I mean, as Lisa said, providing return on investment. Everyone's looking at budgets. That's not going to go away quickly, and nor should it, because that's all about retaining your customers, your client base into the future. Marrying that the physical event, which is, you know, I'm through and through an events professional about, you know, face-to-face media. That's going to be the core of what we do, but it is going to be very much blended with the digital world. And I think everyone benefits. I think again, you know, another really good point Lisa said is going to an event, if it's products, you need to go up, you need to touch them, you need to see them. You can't do that online. And a lot of what's happening in the virtual world, you need to then go and have at some point physically. You know, some of these products that people are procuring are hundreds of millions, billions, whatever it may be. You need to go and interact with people. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Absolutely concur. You know, I used to be involved in a data center show, and you know, you need to see the data centers, right, or a piece of them to be able to do that. So I think depending on the show, whether it's consumer or B2B, as you mentioned, Lisa, there'll be different touch points. I want to move on to staff and resourcing. So I've actually had, thank you everyone for your questions and comments. I'm trying to get through a few of them. Natasha has actually asked, I'll start actually with a question, Lisa, for you. Do you think companies and employers will have the confidence to recruit again in the industry, and when that might happen? And then the follow-up question, which is something we discussed beforehand, is I guess the types of roles and also the skill sets required to do everything we just discussed.
So I think, yes, I do think that, a number of organisers will have the confidence to start to rehire. It hit a number of organisations really, hard. So tough decisions were made, internationally, not just in the UK, but everywhere. But as we begin to see, a light at the end of the tunnel, I do think that mood will begin to change. But I think what will be very interesting to see is the types of hires that we'll make. I generally do think will be different as we go forward. Historically, exhibitions was probably more built on a sales environment, whereas as we begin to come back, I think that switch to being more marketing led, I think, is going to be one of those key drivers, and the marketing capability that we're going to probably want to see as we go forward is, as I think, fundamentally changed. We have got the benefit of all of the work that we've been doing on digital, and that includes the good and the bad, means that we've suddenly realised the value of data, and actually have how critical it is to be able to not only collect the data, but to be understanding what that data tells us. And so, individuals that have the ability to help us do that, I think, are going to be critical. So I do see that the hires that will be made as we go forward will be different, and will probably require non-traditional exhibition, live talent to help us do that. I don't think it's always going to come within. But that said, it's been very interesting. Some of the sort of the more recent employees that have come into our business, there's some real talent there, and actually this has allowed us to uncover that and help elevate their way of working, their capability and their skills to really begin to drive the business forward.
Thank you. Just briefly, if people are watching now, what type of skills do you think you're looking for? Is it digital marketing? Is it tech related? What?
Yeah, I think if I sort of talk about marketing, there's definitely a digital capability, and that is either within executing, campaigns, whether they're to, drive audiences to something which is digital, or drive something digitally to a live event, is one area. The insight piece, I think, is really important. Understanding that data, as I mentioned, I think is going to be an area that will be pushed on quite heavily. And then I think the role of customer, is also going to take on a different view within organisations. And by customer, I do mean visitors as well as exhibitors and sponsors, because that role of, I guess, what was show manager, show director, I think is going to need a different viewpoint as they go forward, because it needs to be, if we just think about a hybrid version of a show, it isn't just a capability to deliver live, it's going to need a lot more. So I do think that those positions are going to evolve, and I don't, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I do see a number of our traditional positions evolving in a different way around what is needed from the understanding of what customers want, so that we can then develop products in line with that need.
I think that's really exciting, actually, because also if you're a current employer, obviously you'll provide training, whether that's internal or external. And one of the things that have come out in the last 12 months are like the Virtual Events Institute and others that have got these fantastic training programs. Ash, be good to get your view, I guess, on teams of the future, and what you think that makeup will be.
Yeah. I think, again, Lisa's made a really good point that the types of individuals will change. I think also it's about upskilling staff. And I think a lot of companies have probably, given the additional time we've all had, I've certainly done it as an individual, is I've invested myself in developing new skills, going back to basics, brushing up on some of the basics, which I think, important traits, and we can lose them along the way. I think the makeup of a team, I think marketing always played a very important part. They will be a bit more center stage in what we do, especially in the case of the hybrid approach. That's going to be really, really important. I mean, ultimately, if you've got a very, very strong marketing team, they can feed the engine of the business through to the commercial team, which is, I'm sure it's an aspiration all organisers will want to get to. But I think having individuals that are truly entrepreneurial, and that might be a nice, easy thing to say. I think it is. We're entering some very, very exciting times to do things differently, to shake things up. And I think the competitive landscape is going to be a really exciting place because everyone's approaching it in a different way. Some people have been more proactive, while some others have been more insular, focusing on what's going on within their business. So I think talent is going to be exceptionally important. It's important at any time, but I think having the right people and having that in place as we exit this period will prepare businesses over the coming years.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And just finish off on sort of staff and resource. Obviously, most offices anywhere in the world, depending when they've opened up again, have either been closed or there's been limited opening and there's been working from home. Lisa, what's Clarion? I can't remember how many employees you have, but it's thousands, right? In these 13 different territories. What's your view going to be going forward? Let's say, let's take the UK, June 21st or whatever it is. Are people still going to be able to work from home? What's your view?
It's been interesting. I mean, clearly everybody adapted incredibly quickly and surprisingly so, or not surprisingly so, because as an industry of problem solvers, that's kind of what we do. And at the very beginning, it felt very new, very different, even though, we always had a reasonable, flexible, policy. It was astounding how things just continued to operate, whether we were in the office or not in the office. That said, I genuinely believe that there is, a real value in bringing people together. Clearly, that's what we do for a living. But on top of that, when you see a team work together in a face-to-face environment, that's when it's very, very powerful. And I think that I would struggle to see that we would be remote on a full-time basis. To me, that isn't. It's certainly not what I personally would want to happen. And the fact that we work on projects, then I do think that coming together of a project team is really does set one team apart from the other. Sure. But that said, will we have some level of flexibility? Sure. I think that it's the way of the world now. Yeah. But I would think we would lose something if it was remote working ever.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's about confidence and peer group mentality as well. And I think, there'll probably be a tipping point.
Yeah.
Where most people, the majority start feeling more comfortable. There's always going to be an element of risk. And there's always going to be more than just COVID around, right? Other diseases. I think that will happen. Ash, do you have a view? I mean, I think your office has been open in Oman pretty much throughout. Am I right? Or, yeah, so...
We have. We've been. I think lockdown here was very short process. I mean, throughout, if you needed to go to the office, you went to the office. I did 2 days working at home. I've got 2 young kids. I love them very much, but I found it very, very hard to work from home. So left my beloved wife to look after them. I found the concept a little bit hard myself, if I'm perfectly honest. I needed to build trust myself. I trust my staff, but you've got temptations at home. Those are a bit younger, games, consoles, TVs, all this kind of stuff. I had to push myself out my comfort zone a little bit, and actually, I was quite surprised because some people worked much more productively than they did normally, and it works in different ways. And I've learned to give them that flexibility, and I think there's an element of it will stay. But at the end of the day, we are selling the medium of bringing people face to face. I think we've got to be preaching that ourselves. As Lisa was rightly saying, having a strong team and strong rapport in it, you build that face to face. You can only do so much online. And I think the markets we serve here, generally speaking, the Middle East is the core of that. Very traditional in how you do business. You get out and you see the whites of people's eyes. I mean, for those where we're dealing our clients outside the region, brilliant. We can get on video calls, as I said earlier in the call this evening, and talk to them, and that's something that we're going to retain. But I'm not saying it's going to be forgotten, but I think people will be chomping at the bit to get back to the office, personally.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Final part, I want to talk about the supply chain. And actually, there's been a few comments in here, and one from John, who's basically suggested or was asking that obviously there are lots of freelancers and small businesses. What's going to be left? And I know, Lisa, you've got some views on the supply chain, and there's some positives, right? Also, because smaller organisers are going to set up because they might have been let go from bigger ones. So, can you give us your view on?
Yeah, I think it's been really, really difficult on the supply chain. There's parts of the industry that, have operated on, pretty small margins, and it meant that unfortunately not everybody has been able to survive, or are making different decisions about where they do and don't want to be, in which markets they want to be. And from that respect, there is some concern around what impact that has on our ability to deliver. And one thing that has been really important over the last 12 months is how those partnerships have actually strengthened where there is partnership, whether it be between a venue, an organizer, and any kind of supplier. Then we've worked very hard to make sure that relationship is built upon, because we're all very reliant on one another, and actually there is no if there's a loser in that value chain, then none of us succeed. So that's been something which I've been very encouraged by in the last 12 months. But equally, on the flip side, we are beginning to see, if we just take the UK market, on some of the the contractors that we work with, there are new entrants coming through to the market in some of the traditional areas of contracting. And I think that's really, really exciting, because our model is beginning to change, not necessarily overnight, but we are going to want different things from different partners as we go forward. And so having that ability to work with both large organisations and small, nimble organisations, I think is critical, and it actually is where the innovation will come from. And it's good to have that those new entrants come through, because it reinvigorates, I think, what we're doing. And I would advocate for as much of that as possible, whether that's in contractors or whether that's through any kind of freelance engagement that we can have, because actually I do think there'll be quite a pent-up need certainly from organisers to bring in that freelance capacity, because there's going to be a crunching of execution and delivery that's going to need to be taking place, with fingers crossed, in the second half of this year.
No, I'm inclined to agree with you. And also, so we were speaking about staff having different talents, or the need for different talents.
Yeah.
It needs to be mirrored and matched with the supply chain as well, right? They need to go sort of hand in hand. And actually, in a funny way, we may end up, I guess, recruiting from the supply chain into show organisers, because that might be a pool that you're looking at. Ash, it'd be great to sort of get your view on that. I'm not au fait with the supply chain in your part of the world, so it'd be interesting to see how that mirrored over here, and how the pandemic has affected it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not as mature a market out here, but it's certainly pretty well served. You've got a lot of the big players out here and smaller businesses. And I think with any adverse economic periods, and let's be honest, this has been a big one, quite shortly after it comes lots of new businesses. Our industry is full of entrepreneurs. There's been a lot of companies that have gone under, unfortunately, which is horrible to see, people that have been affected. But I think the byproduct of that, as we begin to come out, is there will be lots of new businesses, lots of startups, people doing very exciting things, especially within the technology space. And I think it's fast moving, and it's sometimes those smaller businesses that are a bit more agile. They think slightly differently. They'll be first to market. We've got no allegiance to who we work with. We'll work with the company that provides the right products, the right solutions. Return investment for us is really important. It always has been, but I can tell you what, we look at it very carefully, and it's not all about the money side, but it's about what the end results are. Is it meeting our objectives? And that's something we're asking ourselves every day. Why we're doing this, what are our objectives? And we must remind ourselves as we go forward that throughout, rather than we go back to just doing something because we've always done it. So I think it's been very difficult. We've tried to support our suppliers as much as possible. We've continued to pay them. Many of them we paid for events up front before they were cancelled. We've not asked for that money back. We know that it could be terminal if we were to put them in that position. So we've respected that, and we've tried to support them in that context. But I think it's been awful for individuals, for businesses. But I think as we come out this, there's going to be a plethora of opportunities. There really will be, and it'll be exciting.
Thank you. And Lisa, in terms of the smaller suppliers, obviously cash flow is going to be a challenge for them, especially if you just started up. Are the likes of Clarion, do you think, willing to sort of change, I don't know, some of the rules, I say rules in inverted commas, of around payment? Sometimes typically the supplier wouldn't get paid till after the event or just before or certain stages. And I was chatting to Lou, obviously Kuanuka, the chair of ESSA, and I think she's developing a charter between show organisers and suppliers. Is that something that you would support?
Yeah, listen, I think, if we just take a step back and think about, the purpose of what we do, which is connecting typically buyers and sellers and experiences. As organisers, we have a certain amount of contact with our customer set, but all of these suppliers and vendors and partners that we work with actually have probably equally the same amount of contact with our customers as we do. And so getting that right is really important. And so finding those right partners is important. And so they are the sort of things that are going to be important as we go forward. And that flexibility that potentially is going to be needed is just part of the reason why you would choose to work with somebody. I think, as Ashley said, it's actually not always about the price. It's quite often, I think it will come down to what value can we provide our customers, because that's how we keep them happy. That's how we keep levels of satisfaction high. That's how we keep them coming back. So, one element of payment goes into that mix as far as we would be concerned as we think about that longer term view.
Okay, fantastic. So we've had a great session. I've got one last question for both of you. And I'll ask you, Ash, first. What event are you most looking forward to attending? It doesn't have to be one of your own events. Something that you haven't managed to do.
There's not a particular one. It's going to be the first event. I love going on site. I've always loved it. I've worked early in my career. I worked in events and a bit of publishing, but it was nice publishing, getting something tangible. Going on site, being with your colleagues, your team, you build up to it. It's exciting. No matter what the event is, what it's going to be like, seeing those doors open and people come back. I don't want to say emotional, but there's going to be an element of that. For us as a business, it's going to be potentially 2 years since we've had our last event. And I think that's going to be quite a special moment. And, we've lost some colleagues along the way, but and I'm not teary up here, I promise you, but to stand there at the opening door and welcome visitors back to the event as a team, and at the end of it to look at each other and realise what we've been through and what we've learned, that's going to be massively satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Lisa, Reading Festival, you're going to get your tickets? They've announced today, Reading and Leeds, that they're going to be.
Have they? Oh, maybe that is the one. I at risk of stealing what Ash has said, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, whether it's for work, which would be fantastic, whether it's in this country or whether it's overseas, I don't know. One of our key big shows, our national shows, which is coming up in August in the US, is our firefighters show called FDIC in Indianapolis, where we get, all of the first responders are there. They're there to train, do the demos, see all the equipment, and where they've been on the front line throughout a lot of this pandemic. They are the ones that have been manning a lot of the vaccination centres. They've been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes, and to get them back together at an industry gathering for them would be extraordinary. But frankly, I really don't mind whether it's a party, whether it's an association meeting, whether it's a conference or an exhibition or a festival. I think most of us will be at the front of the line.
I concur. That's a good place to end on. Listen, thank you, Ash Roberts, General Manager of Omanexpo, and Lisa Hannant, Group MD of Clarion Events. It's a shame. Thank you very much. It's a shame that Jackie couldn't join us, but I'll get Jackie back on I'll give her her own session when I get a fixed line installed from a supplier that I know. So, hang around in the green room, guys, and have a quick chat with you afterwards. But thank you so much for your time. Okay, so guys, thanks everyone for listening, and those are also listening on demand. Thanks really very much for all the comments and questions. Sorry I didn't get to them all, but they will be in LinkedIn on the page, so maybe the panel will answer them within there. Just want to reiterate the event relief that I'm doing, raising funds for Eventwell next Wednesday. It's 24 hours of me on screen. Who couldn't want that? That'd be fantastic. I'm going all around the world. We've got sessions from Mexico. Ash, who you've just seen, is doing a session. We've got West Coast estates, East Coast, India. So it's going to be fantastic. We're raising money for that. So you'll see some more features. Thank you so much and have a great evening.